Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dawn of Drones podcast. I'm Dawn Zoldi, your host and the CEO of P3 Tech Consulting. We are almost towards the end of Innovation Month. I can't believe it. It's already close to the end of July, which is insane. It's been an incredible month, sponsored by Class G. And oh, by the way, if you missed any of our episodes, go back and watch them on demand. And if you haven't subscribed to DroneLife TV, do it today because you'll always get notified of what our next episode is all about. So check that out. But today I'm so happy to have with us two incredible guests. And I have to say, I'm a little bit biased because for those of you that don't know, I am a Philly girl. And we've got a Philadelphia-based company, Asylon Robotics, and close to Philly, a Jersey gal, Karen DiMeo, my dear friend, and the CEO of AERODiMEO with us today. So great to have you both.
Really excited to be here, Dawn. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're going to do first is, Brent, let's go ahead and have you introduce yourself and your role at Asylon.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So I'm Brent McLaughlin. I'm Chief Operations Officer and one of the 3 co-founders for Asylon. Originally from Oklahoma, I went to MIT for my undergrad in aerospace engineering, which is where I met Adam and Damon, the other 2 co-founders of Asylon. And after MIT, I worked at the Applied Physics Lab at Johns Hopkins University, doing ballistic missile defense, some international program work, but always had a passion for drones and things that fly. And Adam and Damon were the same way. They were at GE and Boeing. And eventually, they somehow both ended up at Boeing at the same time. Somehow, Adam bribed his manager to hire on Damon, which I'm sure that manager regretted for the rest of his life, as allowing the 2 of them to work together. But they had some projects that were wrapping up, and they're like, hey, you know, we're going to do a startup and we're going to do Asylon. We want you to come check it out. And after a few trips, I've actually lived down in Maryland, so I was commuting up on the weekends just to kind of hang out. And it took precisely 2 weekend trips up to Philly. And I was like, okay, I want in. Let's do this. So I've been with Asylon ever since and doing a lot of fun things.
Awesome. Well, for those that may have missed that, because Brent is completely humble, he just said he went to MIT and, oh yeah, I worked on ballistic missiles at this Applied Aeronautics Lab, at Johns Hopkins, and all my buddies, they worked at Boeing, etc., that created this company. So incredible pedigree and background, and we're going to get more into the company and what you guys do. But before we do that, let's go ahead and pivot over to Karen. And Karen, if you could give us a little bit about your background.
Sure. I've actually been in the aviation field for about, I hate to say this, 30 years. Out loud. I've always told people I started in, the kindergarten co-op program, but that's a lie. So yeah, I've been in the industry for quite some time, both in government and industry. And my last role, I was working with GE Aviation. I was head of their policy and government affairs for their drone focused company, which was called AEROS. Unfortunately, that company was a casualty of COVID, and they shut it down. That's when I started my own company, AERODiMEO. So pretty excited about that. It's been really great, coming up on 2 years doing that. But prior to all that, I worked at the FAA for almost 28 years, which was really exciting. I was on the UAS, the drone work from pretty much day one, way back early in 2006. I started working that program, mostly doing applied research and programmatics, because we were just thinking about drones back then. Then ultimately my last role at the FAA was I was a senior technical UAS advisor in the deputy administrator's office. So that was a really awesome opportunity that I had. But I just felt like it was time for me to jump to the other side and try and help from the commercial aspect of this, because I've been truly passionate about it for a really long time. So it's been great meeting you, Don, and everyone in the industry. I guess mostly I specialize in drone policy and regulatory strategies, but I also, have technical expertise in, as I mentioned, aviation R&D and air traffic control background as well.
Yeah, so we got a couple folks already jumping in the chat, which is amazing. And I want to call out Kay Cruz, who, by the way, Karen, Kay is a regular, and he thanks you for your work at the FAA. Kay and everybody out there, Karen also is a very humble person and failed to mention the fact that she actually is a recipient of the 2021 5th anniversary Women to Watch, Women in Drones Global Award for leadership. And it's really for the work that she's done over those years with the FAA, now in your own company. And that's probably a great segue, Karen, to talk a little bit about your relationship with Brent and how you got started working with Asylon.
Well, first of all, thank you, Don. It really was truly a surprise and an honor to win that award from Women in Drones, and Saberwing, which sponsored the award. It was really a highlight of my career. Felt really good, especially when you get an award from peers. So thank you.
Well, and at CES, I mean, that was, if that wasn't cool, I don't know what.
Yeah,
could be
CES
better.
was amazing.
Yeah.
And such a great time too, because everyone was finally getting out again after COVID. But back to your question, how did I get involved with Brent and the Asylon Robotics team? Very early on, I met them. They were very forward-leaning. When I was back in FAA, there was a group of people and companies that were trying to figure out, how are we going to get drones integrated into the community? And this was here in southern New Jersey, where I'm based in Cape May. And Brent's CEO, Damon, was one of the first people that I met. And they were doing something a little bit different there. I'm sure Brent's going to talk about it, but we sort of kept in touch over the years. And the minute that someone leaked that GE was closing down their drone company, the first phone call that I got was from Damon. And he's like, hey, we're still here in Philly. What are you doing now that GE is closing down? So we had a really great conversation, and they're the first client I began working with. So it's been really, exciting, and we've had a good run the last year and a half, and we're excited to share some of that.
Yeah, no, that's so cool, and I think it speaks volumes to your expertise, really. That before you even had jumped full time into your new company, that folks were calling you, folks like Asylon Robotics. So that's a great segue to talk to Brent then about. Tell us a little bit about what Asylon does, and like what I know what they do, but let's make sure everybody does.
Yeah, happy to. So when we started back in August of 2015, for those of you that have been around the UAS industry for any period of time, that was, I think, the peak of the craze. 2015, 2016, Amazon had just done their announcement on 60 Minutes. The drone delivery was only a few years away. And I think the technology is starting to mature enough that the drone industry is really taking off. As I mentioned, Adam, Damon, and I were all aerospace engineers. Damon and I, our senior project was a mini drone. So that was just a lot of fun. And that was our passion. That's what we always wanted to work on. Unfortunately, it seemed like everyone else also had the same passion and was working on that at the same time. So at the 2015 time, the opportunity for us to do Asylon started, but we didn't want to be just another drone manufacturer. We didn't want to be just another quad on a table at AVSI amongst the hundreds of others that were there. So we took a step back, and I give a lot of this credit to Damon and his vision, which is, no one's really focusing on how do we scale this for the enterprise? How do we remove the pilot that's in the field velcroing batteries to these drones, because that was the standard at the time.
That's insane when you think about it. Seriously, like,
yeah,
and
how far
Karen's probably cringing right now because even just from a safety aspect, just having Velcro on a battery, it's like, yikes.
Right, and I think that was even before anyone had any vision of type cert or anything for these class of vehicles, right? So
well, and not only that, Brent, but the time frame you're talking about, the FAA hadn't even put out the Part 107 rule. I mean, it might have been out for comment, but it had not been published yet, right? So you're talking very early kind of into this nascent industry when you're already stepping back and thinking, okay, how do we scale this for enterprise?
Yep. Yeah, it was, Section 333 exemptions for everybody.
Yeah.
Like that was kind of the run rule at the
And they
time.
were a nightmare.
And they were. So yeah, it was an exciting time, but we were trying to figure out, where does Asylon fit? What's going to be our niche in this industry? So we set out, perhaps a bit foolishly, maybe not, to build what we thought was going to be a drone agnostic battery swap station. We were going to build this box. Now everyone knows a drone in a box system. We were just going to focus on the box piece and work with whoever ended up kind of being the champion drones at the time. So we started on that. It took a couple of years. It was a small team. We were a team of 4 for probably 2 years, and grew slightly after that. And then, as I'm sure everyone has seen, the market matured. DJI really kind of took over the market on that end of it. We saw pushback from that Army memo that came out, and the customers that we were talking to at the time were actually pretty security focused, looking at how can they augment their security forces with technology. And they were getting a lot of hand wringing and other things about all the news that was going on. And that's when we decided, basically January 2018, we pivoted to still offer our battery swap station, but offer what we're calling a full stack solution. We decided at that time it made sense to design and manufacture our own drone, design and develop and deploy our own command and control software suite on top of that. And that's where we actually came out with what we call Drone Core. So I think we have a video here that'll kind of talk through a lot of these things, but that's really where we started. It was 2018, is taking all of the expertise and the power of this battery swap station. It takes 3 minutes to swap a battery.
Yeah, so yeah, I think the video is going right now. I don't know what this part is right here.
Yeah, so I think this is actually it's showing Drone IQ. It's showing some of the mission planning capabilities that allow you to, it's cloud-based, so you can do that from anywhere. It actually allows you to command and control the drone from anywhere. So you can log in anywhere that you have an internet connection and deploy these drones, regulations aside, obviously.
Right. We're going to talk about that.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
There's a dog. There's a dog.
Seeing now the robotic dog, the Spot unmanned ground vehicle, uncrewed ground vehicle from Boston Dynamics. We really released that partnership this year. So we've really morphed into not just a drone company, not just a battery swap station company, but a robotics perimeter security company. That's really our expertise and where our experience is and what we have deployed today. So around the country, basically in every time zone, we have robotic dogs, we have robotic drones, and these stations that they live in, and we can remote command and control those from what we call the Robotic Security Operations Center in Philadelphia at our headquarters. So the RSOC is staffed 24/7 with Part 107 certified pilots, with drone dog operators, and they can log in, they get that video streamed to them in real time, and we're doing routine perimeter patrols. We're doing emergent alarm response. So if you have a burg alarm or a fire alarm, or maybe you have a smart electric fence on your facility, if an alarm comes in, we can deploy the robots to go investigate that, so that you're not deploying especially today in this environment, very constrained and resource intensive humans to go walk a fence line across your campus. Like that's insane. It's 2022. Let the robots do that part of it. Leave your humans for the higher level tasking.
Yeah, absolutely. So Brent, so there's almost like a backpack thing on the back of Spot there that says Asylon, and now he's going in the box here. What is that thing on his back? Yeah,
so we call that the pup pack. So the puppy backpack. A little cute name for that. So Boston Dynamics has created an incredible platform. The base Spot platform is absolutely incredible, top notch. What we do is we took a lot of the smarts and technology that we developed for the drone, shoved it all into this little puppy pack, this little puppy backpack, put it on the back of Spot, integrate with their software that they have, and allows us to do this teleoperation, remote command and control over LTE.
Now, does that pup pack also, I'm going to use a technical word here, Brent, because I didn't go to MIT. Does it beam up to the drones? It's Drone Sentry. Is that the name of your drone?
Correct.
Bird?
Yep, we call it Drone Sentry. Yep.
Okay. So does that connect the dog to the bird from a kind of a command and control perspective, or at least a information flow and sharing perspective?
Yeah, great question. And in the general deployment, it does not, just because we typically don't have a need to do so. But we are playing around with some mesh radios and some other things that would allow you to do that, so that you can use the drone as a data relay to go back to your hardline data connection to get pipe everything back up to the cloud. It's great if you have a hardline connection versus LTE, and use the drone as a hot relay for that. So there are some use cases that we're exploring related to that, but it's generally no. We just use an LTE modem in that pup pack, and that's been pretty good for us so far.
Okay, well, you're talking about this RSOC, this remote security, you call it Security Operations Center?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
That's right.
RSOC.
Robotics Security Operations Center.
Robotics Security Operations Center, but it is remote, so this begs the
It is remote,
question
too.
of beyond visual line of sight operations, because you're talking about from Philly, controlling a drone and maybe a dog, like let's just say in Houston, Texas, hypothetically. So is this where Karen came into play, helping get some waivers exempt? Like, how does that work? Because, I think, Brent, I know Karen knows this. I spent 25 years on active duty in the Air Force. And I mean, we've been doing remote drone operations overseas, it seems like forever. But that's not something that's common here for regulatory reasons under Part 107. So can you kind of walk us through how is this even possible that you can do this? Because it's unbelievable. Karen, let's go over to you.
Yeah, so kind of back to when I started working with the team in the very beginning of 2021, I guess, Brent, that was about the time. They were realizing that they needed a more strategic focus and some additional regulatory support for the operations that they wanted to do. So that's, really my role is to help them strategize on those topics. And, we walk through the regulatory needs and the waivers. I'll let Brent talk about the really exciting waivers that they've gotten recently. But yeah, I support the team on going through all those processes, when and what kind of steps that we take in that regulatory process. All of that has to align with where the FAA is today,
Right.
in what they're doing. There's a lot of exciting things to talk about there, a lot of anticipation on the industry's side, a lot of work on the FAA side. But yeah, beyond visual line of sight is really key to the operations and the use case that Asylon Robotics has. And they've been very successful in being able to operate today. Everyone has their eye on scale, and we're getting there. And it is one step at a time. There is no easy fix for this. Anyone who's been through the process knows that it is a process. You have to put your safety culture plays into it, all your safety manuals, building it into your training, all those things. And that's the kind of efforts that I work with the team on a lot. And we've been very successful. We have some excellent relationships and programs that they're involved in now with different government agencies, including the FAA and NASA in the past. But I think, Brent's probably the best to talk about those, because I wasn't involved in all of them, because a lot of that happened before I joined the team. But it's a good tee up to talk about the regulatory wins that they've had. Actually, this year have been quite a few.
Yeah, I absolutely want to do that. Before I do, I want to say two things. Number one is, Mike, in the background there, if you wouldn't mind dropping the article I wrote about Asylon's networked security operations. That was for Inside Unmanned Systems magazine, and I think it's a really great kind of overview of all the different pieces of equipment that you have and how you've integrated them into this holistic security picture. So that's the first thing I would like to say. And then the second thing I wanted to say is, and Karen, I was listening to you, but I was also Googling. I can't find it. I didn't go to my own website. It's on there. I wrote a different article a little before that, maybe a year prior, about this idea of drones as sentries for securing critical infrastructure, and why are we not doing it? And the main reason is regulatory, and the fact that, as you noted, beyond visual line of sight is really critical to enable those kind of operations like what Brent and Asylon have achieved. So Brent, I'm sure everybody wants to hear how you were able to secure these waivers from the FAA that allow you to do what it is that you do.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think Karen obviously refuses to give herself enough credit for the help that she provides in these situations, but her experience at GE Aeros and the experience of others that really focus on the regulatory work has been instrumental in our ability to do those things. We set out in the very beginning. Damon came from GE Manufacturing. He was part of their leadership manufacturing program there. Obviously, safety at big companies like that on shop floors and other things is a critical part, and he brings that expertise and that focus to the company, to everything we do. So safety has always been critical. We actually, our catchphrase there is quality first, safety always. Everyone always has some little quirky way to say that they always do safety, right? You can't. Safety first is no longer good enough. You need something better than that. So we've always focused on that. But what Karen brought to the table is an understanding of what the FAA is looking for, because the FAA, and I love the FAA, they're great people, are very bad at communicating what they want. They'll tell you how good your thing is, but they're not very good at communicating what they actually want from you. And Karen's, insider information there has been very pivotal in that. Being able to take our focus and be very strategic, help us gather even more data and focus on the data that the FAA is interested in, rolls all into that. Something that I like to give Adam Mohammed, our CTO, a lot of credit for is he understood very early on that a parachute was going to be instrumental for drone operations, scaling drone operations. So we were actually the first U.S. company to get ASTM compliance for the parachute.
Now, do you make your own? I'm just curious. Is that a parachute you guys created? Because
no, we don't. We buy that off the shelf. Skycat and Fruity Shoots, great vendors and OEMs for those types of products. So highly recommend those guys. Phenomenal products. But integrating that into the system, we did have to do some engineering there in terms of making sure that it always goes off when it's supposed to, and that all the safety features are enabled to trigger the parachute. The parachute takes care of itself whenever it goes, but in order to enable it when it needs to. So for those that don't know, on the ASTM side, at least currently, it's a minimum of 45 tests across at least 3 aircraft. You're doing full speed forward, hover tests, one motor out, all motor out conditions, and they're measuring your descent rate and your energy upon impact, and it's a lot for good reason. And I think it's really great. And what that pushed us for is obviously we did the 45 plus tests. But we did probably double that just leading up to it to make sure.
And that was just for the parachute aspect of it?
Just for the parachute. Yeah, that's not even anything else. Just the parachute.
I was going to say, so are your drones like American made? And I asked that because you alluded to it earlier with the kind of with the NDAA compliance, right? For those that know what we're talking about, fiscal year 20 National Defense Authorization Act, Section 848. Put in prohibitions for the Department of Defense in particular from buying Chinese drones or drones with Chinese components. And so, Brent, yours is made in the USA, I take it?
It is made in the USA. We have variants of the drones that are NDAA compliant and some that are not, depending on who the customer is. I think that's something that the US is lagging behind, is investment in the strategic manufacturers and OEMs of the products we need to ensure that the United States maintains a leadership role in being able to manufacture drones. The reality is no one can compete with the production costs of overseas. It's just impossible. But I think there's steps that we can take to improve quality and to help drive down costs here in the US that would help those sectors maintain leadership, global leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. I find it really interesting lately. What we see out of the administration is counter UAS policy and not really policy. There's some congressional action in the advanced air mobility sector, like, hey, let's create a working group, but not this kind of infusion of or focus on the actual drone economy in the drone sector. Like, I think it was just last week, the UK put out a memo that, hey, by 2030, we're going to have drones everywhere. I mean, you know, we're just not seeing that here, which is a little disappointing, but kind of getting, I don't mean to squirrel or, you know, go sideways on what you were explaining about, you know, basically your product and what you're doing.
Yeah, so going back to the parachute, it's just a good example of understanding that safety is important and investing in the technology and the people and the candidly to get these operations, these advanced operations waivers, you know, the operational side too. You know, what are your checklists? What is your safety analysis look like? There's a lot of work that went into that. We spent the better part of a year putting together all of the data that we submitted to the FAA for our first BV loss waiver. And that first waiver, we called it quote unquote easy BV loss, as if that's ever a thing.
Yeah.
But it was just waiving the RPICS visual line of sight. That's all. There was no other aspect to that. It took us a year to get everything in place. And then since then, so that actually, we got our first award in January for that waiver. And then back to back, we had 2 more come out that added ops over people, ops over moving vehicles, and operations at night, in addition to the BV loss. And then the third one that we received was all of that in controlled airspace, so in Class Bravo airspace.
So Brent, are these waivers like generalized to your technology regardless of client, or were they for a specific use case and client?
That's a great question. So these, we started out as very specific use cases. What's really great about what we do on the perimeter security side is we like to say we're not trying to boil the ocean. I do not envy advanced air mobility, drone delivery companies, drone as a first responder companies, because you're asking the FAA to give you the blessing to fly over communities, to fly over large assemblies of people and highways and other just critical infrastructure that you have to be able to navigate to be able to execute these mission sets. For us, doing this robotic perimeter security mission, we're over fixed pieces of dirt. We're over secure campus locations.
Yeah.
We're flying the same missions day in and day out. Most of our sites we're operating on anywhere between 60 to 80 hours a week of actual like drone flying around operational time. And that means that we're very familiar with the site. We have hundreds of visual line of sight missions at a site before we even go forward, putting in a request to the FAA for beyond visual line of sight. And I think that helps us on the safety case. It builds the credentials, and it lets the FAA know that we're not just a fly-by-night company that's coming in, going to swoop in and fly a bunch of drones illegally or do something crazy. Like, we know what we're doing. And I think that's the hardest part, is convincing the FAA that you know what you're doing and that you can do so safely.
Well, I'll pivot to Karen on this one then. I assume then with your, I think Brent called it insider information, but you're not an insider anymore. You were, so you have that background and knowledge. I assume that once you get one of these waivers, if you have a similar scenario at a different location for a different client, it's transferable. It's easier, I think, maybe then to get the next one and then the next one and the next one.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that, Don. I mean, Brent mentioning that took a year to get all the original, the upfront work together, that all that's reusable, right? And you're also building confidence with the FAA that you know what you're doing, that you understand aviation, that you understand safety. You know, this team, they put together a safety management plan, which isn't required, but they've done it anyway. And so, you know, it definitely is repeatable in some ways, but today, as you know, the waivers, the exemptions is geographically tied to each operating area.
Sure.
But in their case, they have it, and Brent said it really well, you know, you don't envy some of the, you know, some of our peers that have more complicated use cases, the fact that they, you know, operate typically in less than a square mile, and there's a lot of predictability in what they're doing. It's very well planned. You know, they're doing perimeter security. It's over and over again. Obviously, you know, there's some events that happen, but that gives a lot of that helps a lot with their use case. I would say today is probably one of the perfect use cases, you know, to move forward in this whole process, as we are all learning what does the FAA want, and you know how they're working. I'll also add that part of understanding the FAA is understanding their different offices and what their roles and responsibilities are, because a lot of time, you know, you just don't even know who to call or email. They have the
Or
help
even know the
site.
acronym. You know, I mean, no,
It's a whole other
seriously. I mean,
language.
look, having been in the military, you know, you talk to somebody that never was, and you throw out an acronym, they don't know what you're talking about, three-letter office, whatever. I imagine the same applies in any sector of the federal government, including the FAA.
Yeah. And you also
Yeah.
have to keep up with like what is happening every day. You know, FAA is giving out more permissions to
Yeah.
operate, and each time they do it, we're learning from it. So we're all learning from it as an industry. So one of the things that people say, oh, well, you know, what would you like, you know, them to do better? Transparency has been a challenge. There's a lot of concerns about proprietary information and things like that, but communication, Brent said it really well, with the agency has been a challenge. It is definitely getting better. I mean, when I started there was literally a handful of people in the entire agency of 45,000 people. There was like 5 or 10 people working on it. Now there's hundreds and hundreds of people working on UAS, and it's across the agency. I mean, that it's definitely caught on. It's not a little research project anymore, you know, that's 20 years down the road.
Yeah.
So we've really come a
Well,
long way in a
you
short
know,
time. In FAA, that's like, oh, that's quick for them. So
yeah, well, and I was going to say to your earlier point about, you know, the FAA maybe not telling you what they want. It could be in part for fear of releasing proprietary information. Like maybe they learned it from a company, you know, they learned it from a process that a company had, that they're the only company that had that, right? So if they tell you, so I think that the proprietary piece, in fact, it was just at the Energy Drone Robotics Coalition Summit in Houston, Texas in June, and great talk about beyond visual line of sight. John Damish from Iris Automation moderated that panel. You know, the CEO of Census Technologies was talking about that, you know, just like, hey, we need to get out of this NDA culture. You know, he was just like, hey, I've got like 12 projects I can't tell you about right now, which is kind of insane because we can't get the good word out about what is happening. But we've got a couple great comments in the chat, so I want to address them. James Standen, who actually is a Texan, before you go, saying he saw Spot actually at the EDRC conference, and what an attention getter. He says it would be great in marketing, and I'd love to. We had a great, actually, I wasn't there for the first time ever on Clubhouse last week. I was on vacation, and Maggie Schuster and Tony Drummond did an amazing job with these two. By the way, we do have that replay, so I know Mike's going to drop that in the chat too. You guys can go back and listen to that. It was a great conversation, but can we repeat that story, Brent, of you with the, you know, kind of the public acceptance walking drone dog through your neighborhood?
Yeah, so I have he's now 3.5-year-old son who, when I first showed him Spot or Drone Dog, he was absolutely terrified of it. He came to the office that day, kind of hung out, didn't want anything to do with it. And then by the time we got to lunch and we stepped away from the dog, that's all he could talk about, was how cool the robot puppy was, and that's all he wanted to do. So from then on, every time I come home from work, he didn't care about me. He just wanted to know if I was bringing the robot puppy home. So of course, eventually I had to oblige. So I brought it home one weekend, and obviously I was going to do some like real work with it too. But
Yeah, sure.
yeah, absolutely.
Totally.
So I took it out for a walk around my neighborhood. I live in a little townhome community, and was walking it down the street. You know, my son's kind of like chasing after it, and a car drives by, and he like slams on his brakes and reverses back, and he like leans out the window. He's like, "Do you just casually own a Spot?" He's just like completely incredulous that you know, it's now the future. The future is now, right? Like we're now going to be
Right,
walking
like
our
people
robot
are
dogs
walking
for
their
exercise.
robot dogs in my neighborhood. I
So,
love
you know,
that.
then, you know, it turns into this very long and exasperated conversation about why do I have a Spot and why is it walking in the neighborhood?
Yeah.
Which really was just to entertain my 3-year-old. But yeah, it is almost cheating when it comes to marketing. Like everyone loves the robot dog. I don't know if it's just because humans are just innately tied to dogs in some way,
I think
or if it's just
so.
a
Yeah.
cool factor, right?
I
And
would love
it
it,
is.
honestly. I know Boston Dynamics doesn't care about my ideas, but having a head, I think, would be awesome. Like, I think actually making it look a little bit more like a dog instead of a headless dog would just kind of kick it up a notch, and you could put like cool sensors on the eyeballs, I would think, or on the
Yeah, I
nose
played
or the
around.
ears. Like there's ways to do this. I don't know, but anyway, very cool. There's also another
There's a
comment
mod
here.
we could think about, Brent.
There you go.
Well,
I'm
so
just
I was
saying.
gonna, I played around with those big googly eyes from like Hobby Lobby. You
Yeah.
throw on those like 5-inch googly eyes. It's an attention getter for sure. It's a lot of fun.
Well,
Of
there is a
course he
company
did.
I talked to. They're doing some cool stuff with robotics, and there's ways to emote robots. I'll just leave it at that. Okay. Let's see. Wow, we got so many comments today. This is awesome. Your robot puppy rocks. Your kid is a marketing genius, Brent. And then two really good ones here. Really getting to beyond visual line of sight. One to kind of this Chinese like and American manufacturing thing. First of all, comment from Chris Wedgeworth, our buddy, who's always out there every week saying that he would rather buy USA made drones. But on that note, Kay Cruz is asking you, Brent, would the shortage of microchips slow down domestic drone development and manufacturing? Is that one of the limiting factors right now?
It is. It absolutely is. And I think that's one of those areas that I think, the United States as a whole, whether that's the government or venture capitalists or whoever, could take some investment and help shore that up. We've seen minimum price increases of double for most things that use these chips, assuming you can even get them. We've taken to the point where we're now buying some components off eBay. Like we're bidding against other people on eBay for like core components for some aspects because the chip shortage is affecting everything. And it has been for almost 18 months now.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it absolutely is.
So that's a limiting factor. But then let's pivot to Karen for this one. Tim Scott asks, how do you think the FAA's work on beyond visual line of sight regulations will play out and affect the needs for waivers?
Well, that's a really good question. As probably everyone on here knows, there was an aviation rulemaking committee that concluded. Oh my gosh, I can't remember. It was
like I think March or
March.
like
I was
January.
gonna say it was first quarter.
Yeah.
I think it was originally due in January, but it was very complicated. It was a great report they put out. There's a lot of recommendations in there. And, I would say tens of millions of dollars of industry time and effort has gone, into that. And it's handed over to the FAA. I know they're working really, really hard on it. And really, we're waiting to see what their response is going to be in rulemaking. And by the way, it's great to hear from Tim. I work with Tim at GE, and we affiliate, co-consult in the industry now as well. He works with ANS and Amand. But that's I wish I had the crystal ball on that one, but what I think is going to happen and what's been announced by FAA and keeps being reiterated is that they're going to sort of do a progressive rulemaking. Not just one rule that will come out, but maybe several, and they're going to try to implement some things that industry has suggested doesn't necessarily take a rule. We don't want it to take that long. There's some changes that you could make, amendments maybe to Part 107, or put out some guidance, do some, additional use case work, some similar things to what they're doing in Europe, are things that we as an industry has suggested, and they want to succeed too. They have a lot of pressure internally from Congress, globally. So, I think that the will is there, but it is very complicated. And FAA is not the only government agency involved in all this, right? FCC gets involved. The law enforcement, federal law enforcement has concerns, and as well as they should. So there's a lot of coordination that goes on. I am not making excuses for them. We push them hard, being part of trade associations and things like that. We give a lot of encouragement to the agency to move along. But, my best guess, I would say that it's going to take them probably 1 or 2 years to get an NPRM out. So I think we're looking at best case having a rule in effect that would really help scale. The industry is going to still be 2 to 3 years from now. But again, they have a good plan in that they're going to try and have some interim wins in between that will help build up to that rule. So,
well, Karen, that makes a lot of sense. And for those that didn't know, the report it's publicly available. It's over 400 pages. Great bedtime reading. By the way, they're also the FAA is also engaging in public listening sessions. So they put out several calls. They had one about 2 months ago, and there's one actually next Wednesday, the 28th, is it, or the 26th? I don't remember. It's next week at like 5:30 p.m. Eastern time. So all that's on the FAA website. It's also I put it on my LinkedIn. Listen into those discussions because they're really interesting, and you can really, I think, start appreciating the complexity of the challenge for beyond visual line of sight, technology aside, on the regulatory side. Just the fact that the report or the recommendations were over 400 pages should tell you something. So this is no easy. I like the idea, Karen, of kind of, I think it was, I don't know who said it, you or Brent, you don't need to boil the ocean. Like, why tackle all 400 pages of recommendations? We can chip away a little bit at a time. And, like you said, using Europe as a model, with the JARIS, SORA, and those specific scenarios, or I forget what they're called, SSOs or something, where it's almost like Brent's waivers, right? To the extent that people can check off A, B, C, D, and we know A, B, C, D works, and it's worked not only for Asylon, but for this company and that company, we can regularize that and say, if you have A, B, C, D, you're, apply, but you're going to be good. I mean, I think that would be a really great way to go, and I don't know why we're not already doing something like that.
Right. Just to give one example of what we as an industry proposed, I wasn't on the ARC, but I gave input through trade associations and others that were on it.
Yeah.
Everyone who did a great job on that. But a really good example of that is something called shielded operations.
Oh, right. Yep.
Right. So that's something that, you definitely don't need. We're seeing it happen in other countries. That's a use case that they're using, similar, for critical infrastructure inspection, etc. We've come up with this shielded operations, and we don't think that requires rulemaking, and the FAA seems to agree with that. So we're hoping that would be one that would come out way sooner than later. We don't need to wait a year or two, for a proposed rule. There's also a lot of people aren't aware that Section 44807, which gives the administrator permission to grant exemptions, is expiring. And we need Congress and the FAA, well, hopefully just the FAA to extend that authority. We need Congress to extend that authority for the FAA administrator immediately.
When is that expiring? This October?
You're gonna ask. I think it's this October. It's either
Holy
September.
Shnikes, because same with, that's what the big hearing was, right? A couple of weeks ago on Counter UAS was the emerging, Preventing Emerging Threats Act in the 2018 FAA reauthorization, which gave, right, DHS, FBI, Coast Guard authorities to do counter drone. That's also expiring. So it's like, holy shnikes, folks, let's get on this. This is kind of important. And oh, by the way, we literally have 2 minutes left, which I think is insane also, because we could talk all day long, and we've spent a lot of time answering the audience's questions, which I love. So thank you everybody for engaging with these two, because incredible experts at your disposal. So on that note, what I want to do is give each of you, your 30-second elevator speech, and also tell folks where they can find you, where they can see you live, maybe at the next event, so they can meet you in person and maybe continue the conversation. So let's start with you, Karen. We'll end with you, Brent.
There was a lot of questions there. Well,
okay, so tell us your 30-second elevator speech, how you want to wrap up, and then where they can find you and where they can see you.
Okay, so from what I love to do, I think it's going to be an interesting year. I want everyone to keep their eye on FAA reauthorization, participate in that. If you have ideas, send them forward. Keep pushing on BVOS rulemaking. Get excited about new leadership in the FAA, because that's always an opportunity. And, you know, also look for the first UAS type certification, because we've been hearing for a while that's coming. That's going to be a real boost for everyone in our industry once we get, you know, one company through the gate. You can find me at AERODiMEO.com, my website, and the next time you can find me probably in person at a public event will be the Commercial UAV Expo in Vegas. I know there's a couple things in August, but I'm sending my first kid to college, so I'm hunkering down this August because I'm just trying not to break apart.
I know that feeling. Got my last one going, but no, thank you for that, Karen. Go ahead, over to you, Brent.
Yeah, I think I would echo Karen's excitement about a lot of the upcoming events. There's definitely a lot on the table. I would say, as an engineer at heart and by trade, I'm most excited about tech finally maturing to the point where people like the FAA feel comfortable approving it for these advanced operations. I think trying to do some of this BVLOS stuff 3, 4, 5 years ago would have been impossible. Like, the tech just wasn't there. It's not reliable, not robust, but the industry is still too RC hobbyish. But I think it's finally coming into its own, and I'm really excited. We have interoperability on payloads and comms and flight control. The world is your oyster on tech now, which is phenomenal, and I think that's what I'm most excited about. To find out more about Asylon, AsylonRobotics.com is our website, and I would say LinkedIn is probably our primary channel for the latest news and information, so be sure to follow us there.
Are you guys going to be at any upcoming shows, Brent?
Yeah, I think the next one we're planning to be at is GSX, which is September in Atlanta. So we'll be at Global Security Expo. Again, we primarily focus on the security side, so ISC West, ISC East, GSX, those are our bread and butter for the most part.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. Well, thank you both so much. Thank you, everybody that is out there talking. I'm just going to please don't hang up. Stay tuned, because we have, next week's guests, our clubhouse guests this week, etc., rolling when we kind of sign off here. But thank you again. That's all she wrote. Appreciate all of you, and we are out here.
Thanks, Dawn.